Picture this. You walk into a restaurant for a blind date, and half your office is hiding in the corner, waiting to laugh at you. Not to cheer you on, not to hope it works out, but to record your humiliation. That was Jenna Harper's reality. She never wanted this date. Her coworkers pushed her into it, and Vanessa, the office queen of gossip, was leading the game. Jenna had overheard her just days earlier. Wait till you see Jenna on her blind date. He's a broke single dad. Pathetic. We'll catch it all on video. They weren't setting her up for love. They were setting her up for shame. And Jenna already knew pain too well. At 26, life had beaten her down. A boyfriend who stole her savings and ran away with her best friend. A sick mother she visited every night at the hospital. And a heart so guarded, she had almost forgotten what it felt like to trust. Still, that night, she showed up. Rosewood Bistro. Candlelight spilling onto the street. To strangers, it looked romantic. To Jenna, it looked like a trap she couldn't escape. Her palms were sweaty as she followed the hostess through rows of couples whispering over wine glasses. Her chest tightened with every step. And then she saw him, her date. A tall man in a simple shirt, waiting at the corner table. But that wasn't what stopped her cold. Because sitting right beside him was a little girl, no more than 4 years old, curly hair bouncing, a stuffed bunny in her hands. A child, on a blind date. What kind of man does that? Who in the world brings a kid on a blind date? That's exactly what Jenna thought when she saw the little girl sitting there. Barely 4 years old, curly hair, round cheeks, and a stuffed bunny clutched tight in her arms. This wasn't what Jenna signed up for. And deep down, she could already hear Vanessa and her friends laughing from across the room. The man stood up politely. Simple shirt, tired eyes, but steady hands. He pulled out Jenna's chair and spoke gently. "Hi, you must be Jenna. I'm Brian. And this little one is Sophie." Jenna froze. A kid? Really? And just as she expected, from the other table came that ugly little laugh. Vanessa and her friends, holding their phones, pretending to scroll, but clearly recording. They were waiting for Jenna to panic, to run, to give them the show they wanted. Her face turned hot. She almost stood up to leave. But then, Sophie looked right at her and smiled. A pure, innocent smile. The kind you can't fake. She picked up her purple crayon, scribbled something quickly on her notepad, and proudly held it up. "Look, you're a princess." It was a shaky little drawing. A blonde woman with a crown. But for Jenna, it felt like someone had just cracked open the wall around her heart. She swallowed hard. "That's beautiful," she whispered. Brian chuckled softly. "Her usual favorite is dinosaurs. So you must be really special." And just like that, Jenna felt herself relax a little. Brian wasn't flashy. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't even trying to impress her. He was just real. But of course, Vanessa couldn't resist ruining the moment. She got up, fake smile plastered on her face, and leaned close. "Wow, Jenna. Didn't know you were into single dads. How perfect." The room felt heavy. Jenna's chest tightened. She braced herself for the embarrassment. But before she could even speak, Brian lifted his head. Calm, steady. And he said, "I'm proud to be a father. And I respect the woman across from me a lot more than anyone at your table ever will." Vanessa's smirk faded. And for the first time that night, Jenna realized this wasn't going to be the disaster everyone was waiting for. This man was different. What Jenna thought would be her worst night slowly started to feel different. Brian had just defended her, right in front of Vanessa. Calm, confident, proud to be a dad. And that one moment shook Jenna to her core. She expected him to be embarrassed. Maybe to avoid eye contact. Maybe to laugh along with Vanessa's group. But no, Brian looked her straight in the eyes, steady and kind, like he was telling her, "You don't need to be ashamed." And for the first time in years, Jenna's chest felt lighter. The dinner went on. At first, it was small talk, books, favorite places in the city. But Brian wasn't fake. He didn't ask meaningless questions. He really wanted to know her. What made her smile? What she missed? What she dreamed of? And slowly, without even realizing it, Jenna started to relax. Then there was Sophie. Oh, Sophie made the evening unforgettable. She puffed her chest and proudly declared, "I'm the ice cream princess, and Daddy is Sir Napkin." Jenna laughed out loud, an honest, unguarded laugh. The kind of laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. And it felt good. So good. By the end of dinner, the tension had melted away. When the bill came, Jenna quickly reached for her wallet. She didn't want to feel like she owed anyone. But Brian gently stopped her. "Please let me handle this." His voice wasn't arrogant. It wasn't the voice of a man trying to prove anything. It was simple, sincere. And that's when Jenna felt it. A spark. Small, fragile, but real. Walking out of the restaurant that night, her heart wasn't heavy with shame anymore. It was beating with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. And just a few days later, that hope grew. A polite "thank you" text turned into long conversations. Good morning messages. Funny photos of Sophie wearing a crown made of foil. Jenna caught herself smiling at her phone. Smiling like a teenager. And that's when she realized something was happening. Something she thought she'd never feel again. What started as a small thank you text quickly turned into something Jenna never expected. At first, it was just polite. "Thanks for dinner." But then Brian replied. And one message turned into two. Then into long late-night chats. Good mornings. Funny little updates. Pictures of Sophie wearing a foil crown, calling herself the queen of snacks. And every time her phone buzzed, Jenna found herself smiling. Smiling in a way she hadn't in years. Soon, Brian invited her to Sophie's art exhibition at the community center. At first, Jenna thought, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe it's too much. But Sophie's excited little voice on the phone made it impossible to say no. The day of the event, Jenna walked in, and her eyes widened. The place was buzzing with life. Kids running around with paint on their hands. Paper butterflies hanging from the ceiling. Music echoing in the halls. It didn't feel fancy, but it felt alive. Brian met her at the entrance. Sophie balanced proudly on his hip wearing a pink tutu and plastic tiara. "She's been waiting all week for this," he said with a grin. Sophie jumped down, grabbed Jenna's hand, and dragged her across the room. "Come on, you have to see mine." And when Jenna looked at the painting, she froze. On the canvas were three figures. A little girl in purple, a tall man, and a blonde woman in a yellow dress. Above them, in big red letters, it said, "Mommy too." Jenna's eyes stung. Her voice cracked. "Wait, is that supposed to be me?" Sophie nodded, completely serious. "Of course. You make Daddy smile. That's what mommies do." Jenna couldn't speak. She just stood there, holding back tears. But as the event went on, she noticed something else. Everyone at the center seemed to know Brian. Parents shook his hand. Teachers thanked him. Volunteers greeted him with respect. He wasn't just another dad in the crowd. Something about him didn't add up. And then, as they were leaving, Jenna happened to glance at his phone. An email flashed on the screen. Not from a friend. Not from work. It was from one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. Her stomach dropped. Brian wasn't just the simple single dad she thought he was. The man Jenna thought was just ordinary was actually hiding something extraordinary. That night, after the exhibition, Jenna finally asked the question that had been eating at her since she saw his phone. Brian didn't dodge it. He didn't lie. He just smiled gently and said, "You saw it, didn't you?" Jenna nodded nervously. "I try to keep it quiet," he admitted. "People treat you differently when they find out. But yes, I'm a CEO. I built my own company." Jenna froze. "A CEO?" The man sitting in front of her, the one in plain shirts, the one who called himself just Sophie's dad, was actually wealthy, powerful, respected. Her chest tightened. Suddenly, all she could think about was the difference between them. He was successful, stable, important, and her? She was barely keeping her life together, juggling hospital visits for her sick mother, still scarred from betrayal, still broke from the money her ex stole. The more she thought about it, the smaller she felt. And that's when Vanessa struck again. One morning, Jenna walked into her office and felt the stares. Every single eye on her. Her phone buzzed. A notification. She clicked, then her stomach turned. It was a picture of her tying Sophie's shoelace, posted online with the caption, "Some women will play house with anyone just to feel needed." The comments were cruel. Laughing emojis, mocking words, people making her feel like a joke all over again. By the next day, Jenna couldn't take it anymore. She quietly slid her resignation letter onto her manager's desk and walked away without a word. She felt exposed, humiliated, not good enough for Brian, not even good enough for herself. But that night, her best friend Clara stormed into her apartment with takeout in her hands and fire in her eyes. "So that's it? You quit your job. You ghosted Brian. You're running away from the only good thing that's happened to you in years." Jenna looked down at the floor. Her voice broke. "You wouldn't understand. He's everything I'm not. Successful, strong, stable. And me? I'm just a mess. He probably only feels sorry for me." Clara's voice softened. She stepped closer and said the words that cut through Jenna's fear. "You're not afraid of failing, Jenna. You're afraid of being loved for real. Sometimes, the hardest part of love isn't falling in love. It's believing you actually deserve it." And that's where Jenna was stuck. Every time Brian's name flashed on her phone, her heart jumped. But instead of replying, she stared at the screen, then put the phone down. One day passed, then two, then a week. Slowly, she started ghosting him. Why? Because in her mind, the fear was louder than the hope. What if I'm not good enough for him? What if I hurt Sophie? What if he wakes up one day and realizes I was never worth it? So Jenna did what she always did. She ran. She pulled away before anyone else could leave her. Her apartment turned quiet, lonely, but she kept convincing herself, this is safer. This way, no one gets hurt. Clara didn't buy it. One evening, she barged in with food in her hands and fire in her voice. "You quit your job. You cut him off. Jenna, you're not protecting Sophie. You're just running again." Jenna whispered, tears in her eyes. "You don't understand, Clara. He's stable, successful, everything I'm not. He deserves someone better. And Sophie, if I let her love me, I'll only end up breaking her heart too." But Clara leaned forward and said words that hit harder than anything else. "You're not scared of failing, Jenna. You're scared of being loved for real." Jenna sat frozen, because deep down, she knew Clara was right. And then, 2 nights later, there was a knock at the door. Her chest tightened. She opened it slowly. It was Brian. Calm, quiet. Sophie asleep in his arms, clutching her little bunny. He spoke softly. "I didn't come to fight. I just needed to see you. One last time, if that's all you'll give me." Before Jenna could answer, Sophie stirred awake. She slid down from her dad's arms, walked over, and handed Jenna a folded paper. With shaking hands, Jenna opened it. It was a drawing. 3 people holding hands under a rainbow. A man, a little girl, and a blonde woman. Above it, in bright crayon letters, it said, "Our family. One moment can change everything." Clara knew Jenna was slipping back into her old fears. That's why she dragged her to the annual Women Who Rise conference. "You need to hear real stories," Clara insisted. "You need to be reminded of who you are." But sitting in that huge ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of strong, confident women, Jenna felt out of place. While they clapped and cheered, she sat in the back row, shrinking in her seat, clutching the program in her hands. Shame pressed down on her chest. "What am I even doing here?" she thought. Then the announcer's voice rang out. "And now, please welcome our final speaker, the founder of a Hope Sparks Foundation, Mr. Brian Morgan." Jenna's head snapped up. Applause thundered. And there he was, walking across the stage in a navy suit. Calm, steady, and very, very real. Her heart pounded. She hadn't seen him in weeks. She had pushed him away. And now, here he was, standing tall in front of an entire ballroom. Brian's voice carried through the room. "I started Hope Sparks after I lost my wife. I needed a reason to keep showing up for my daughter. And for myself. What I didn't expect was to find something else along the way. Something that gave me hope again." The room was silent. His words weren't polished or rehearsed. They were raw, honest. And then his eyes found hers. In that moment, it felt like the entire ballroom disappeared. No crowd, no lights, just Brian and Jenna, locked in a quiet stare that said everything words couldn't. And before anyone could process what was happening, Brian stepped off the stage. Gasps filled the room. Whispers spread. But Brian didn't care. He walked straight down the aisle, every eye following him, until he stood right in front of Jenna. Her breath caught. And then, in one smooth motion, he knelt, not with a diamond meant to dazzle, but with a simple gold band. The entire room went silent. A room full of strangers watched, as Jenna's world changed forever. Brian was down on one knee, a simple gold ring in his hand. No diamonds, no flash, just something real. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "Jenna, the night they made a joke out of my daughter, you sat down anyway. You looked past the whispers. You saw us. You made Sophie feel special, and you made me believe again. Every moment since then has only proven what I already knew, that you are the kindest part of my life. So, will you give me the honor of being my wife?" The room was dead silent. Hundreds of women staring. Jenna's chest rose and fell, her hands trembling. For a second, she couldn't even breathe. And then, through tears, she nodded. Small at first, then stronger. Yes, yes. The ballroom erupted. Applause. Cheers. People rising to their feet. Brian slipped the ring onto her finger and stood. Jenna fell into his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. And then, suddenly, a tiny figure in a tutu came running down the aisle. Sophie. She threw her little arms around Jenna and whispered with wide eyes, "Does this mean I have a mommy now?" Jenna bent down, hugging her tight, her voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart, you do." Brian crouched beside them, wrapping his arms around both. For the first time, the three of them stood together. Not as strangers, not as a cruel joke, but as a family. It felt like the perfect ending. But deep down, Jenna couldn't help wondering, would this beautiful moment last beyond the fairy tale? Or would reality come knocking again? Underscored, The cruel joke that started it all ended up becoming the foundation of forever. After saying yes, Jenna's life slowly transformed. She moved into Brian's home, and for the first time in years, it actually felt like home. Laughter in the mornings, Sophie running through the halls, dinner at the table together. Simple moments, but for Jenna, they meant everything. And it didn't stop there. Inspired by Sophie's Mommy 2 painting, Jenna and Brian launched a free art program for kids who had nothing. Kids who carried pain on their shoulders suddenly had a place to heal with colors and drawings. And at the heart of it all was Jenna. Brian made her the executive director of his foundation because he trusted her more than anyone. For Jenna, it wasn't just about titles or work. It was about purpose, about belonging, about finally believing she deserved this happiness. Sophie blossomed too, confident, happy. Every time she picked up her crayons, she'd smile and say, "This one's for Mommy." And every single time, Jenna's eyes filled with tears. A year later, on their first anniversary, Brian surprised her. He took her back to Rosewood Bistro, the exact place where it all started. As they walked through those doors hand in hand, Jenna felt a rush of memories. That first night, the cruel whispers, Vanessa's mocking laughter, the humiliation that almost broke her. But now, everything was different. The hostess smiled and asked, "Same table?" Brian nodded. Sitting down, Jenna looked around, then turned to Brian. "Do you ever think about that night? About how it all began?" Brian squeezed her hand and smiled softly. "Sometimes, but never with anger. Because if they hadn't tried to make you the punchline, I never would have found you." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. She whispered back, "Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as the worst moments." Brian kissed her hand gently, and in that moment, Jenna realized what once started as a cruel joke had become the most beautiful chapter of her life. Forever had found her, right where she least expected it.